welcome to another episode of Cardio Goths, the show where we explore endurance culture, metaphysical fitness, and how pushing your physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional limits can and will lead to transformation, and if you're lucky, transcendence, and if we're really lucky, earthly ascension. I don't really know what earthly ascension is, but I'm into it. I'm your host, Daniel Wakefield Paisley. Today we're joined by mountain athlete, trail and ultra runner, and endurance sports coach, Alyssa Amos-Clark. And we're going to talk about lizard brains, how to coach them, how to manage them, what they want, what they need, are they bad, what's the deal with lizard brains. Lizard Brain 101. Hi, Alyssa. Welcome to Cardio Goths.
Thanks for having me. Also love the name. That's a fantastic podcast name.
Yeah, I think so, right? It's like, you know, I feel like a lot of people who do endurance stuff are, part of it is physical, but a lot of it is like mental health related. And it's kind of, you know, there's a little goth, there's a little emo in endurance.
Oh, we totally have a dark side. That's like, you have to be able to spend hours and hours in your own brain, and it's weird. So I feel like they go hand in hand. That
is funny. You like your brain, if you spend time in there, it's not all bad. A lot of it's nice, but sometimes it really, you know, being alone with your thoughts is not necessarily a super fun activity.
It's hard to hide from the dark parts because you get to a point, also you get to a fatigue level where, you cannot suppress them. You can't distract from them, which I think is always kind of a scary, interesting, great part of endurance.
1,000% agree. Okay, before we jump in on lizard brains, I want to just talk about some of your accomplishments because you have a number of them. In the 2023 UTMB World Canyons 100 miler, you were the first female and 11th overall. You have the Lone Pine to Mount Whitney Summit via Mountaineers Route FKT. And at one point, you held the Guinness Women's World Record project of consecutive days running a marathon distance. You did 95 marathons in 95 days. I'm just wondering if you have like a single greatest achievement, and if it's one of the ones I listed, and if it's not one of the ones I listed, and you've done a number of you've achieved, and I'm just wondering what your relationship to achieving is.
You know, it's hard. Like, there's definitely a couple of those that stand out to me, and also a couple of others that are really meaningful to me. I'm not sure if necessarily I can name one as my greatest achievement. To be honest, I'm not even sure that I don't think that's happened yet, which is exciting. Someone asked me that a couple of months ago, and I was like, oh, I don't think I've even come close to what that can be, so I don't think I've done it yet. Or at least I hope
Wait, so
not.
you don't have like a placeholder? You're like leaving that space open? Like actively, you're not like, well, this will do for now, and I hope to replace it. You're just like not gonna have one until you have the one.
I think so. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I mean, to be honest, it's like I look at every one of the achievements and I see ways I could have improved, and I feel like I haven't put all of those improvements together in whatever perfect means, in, you know, that package to the extent that I believe I'm capable of doing. But it's like each one of those built a piece of me that's then going to lead to whatever that is. Okay.
I'm hearing foundation, building blocks. I'm hearing, you know, like building towards something.
Yeah. You know, I guess the one maybe I would say was a significant source of growth because I had been kind of on this, we'll call it failing streak for a lack of a better term, was I did the Pinhoti Trail, which is a 350-mile trail that's basically the start of the Appalachian Mountains in Georgia and Alabama. And I'd actually failed on it the year before. I had just kind of really big ups and downs in my running of like, hey, pretty good, you know, result, and then like massive failure. And I made a really conscious decision within that run where I was so honestly just tired of failing that I chose to succeed kind of no matter what was happening and pushing through a lot of physical discomfort and uncertainty. And I think that that was a huge breakthrough of, I think we spend a lot of time telling ourselves what we might be capable of, but it's another thing to actually stare that in the face and say, no, I'm going to do this, and have the decision kind of in your hands, and a really conscious decision, which actually, yeah, definitely ties into the lizard brain moment. Because it was like, I just remember everything going like red and being like, I am not going to stop. Like, I have every reason to stop, but I'm not going to. And just being like, here's, like, I have failed so many times, I just don't want to fail anymore. All I want to do is be successful. And then ending up, like, continuing. And I still had 150 miles left, like, at that point. So I'd say that was a pretty big breakthrough moment. But still, yeah, still searching for the ultimate.
Did that wind up being like a classic achievement? Well, that was an FKT, right? Like yeah.
Yeah. So it's the woman's fastest supported time on the Pinhoti Trail. It's a sneakily tough trail where on paper, yes, it's hard, but doable. And then there's a lot of pavement sections, which really just wrecks people. So it was kind of putting all the pieces together to make that happen. And luckily not being too far off the men's time as well, which I always enjoy kind of seeing how level the playing fields can be in endurance sports.
Of course, yeah. I feel like it does seem like the longer you go, the leveler it gets. Is that true? Did I lie, or is that's this feeling I have? Is the longer it goes, the leveler it gets?
Yeah, there's studies that women are actually stronger than men for a few reasons. With really long distance running in particular is kind of the main focus. We're particularly strong at vacillating between carbohydrate and fat metabolism, and we also have a higher supply of fat. So there's that aspect of it. Also, pain tolerance can be a pretty high factor just because of childbirth, that factors into things. I don't know a ton of women that are like, I'm going to go try this thing and probably fail, and that's okay. There's a lot more calculation and like certainty behind the decision making. And that's, again, this is kind of like a generalization. Rather, I think there's a little bit more of like, I'm just going to give it a shot and see what happens, and kind of like a more male mindset. And that's a really strong binary. And I think some cases it's true, but like when I've stood on the start lines of like really extreme races, there's an unbelievably significantly less amount of women than men, and they generally have a higher percentage finish rate. So, which I wish women were more like, let's give it a shot, and if I fail, that's okay. But I think there is a calculation that comes into it that's a little bit of a societal impact.
Oh, that's super interesting about the percentage completion. Like, yeah. I didn't like that. Like, there's fewer DNFs.
There's fewer DNFs, and that's saying like, okay, so in say a 350 person race, there might only be 50 women in that race, and so the percentage is higher, but also like that's just a much smaller pool of people that you're doing your study from. But yeah, it is higher than the male percentage.
Speaking of coaching, you coach for uphill athlete.
I do.
Is there something that makes uphill athlete? Is there like a philosophy or like are there like key tenets? I just love how specific it is. I love that it's just like we're gonna go to uphill. Yeah,
so uphill was founded upon basically the principles that a lot of the sport. So we focus on mountain running or trail running in the mountains, essentially, rock climbing, mountaineering, alpinism, ice climbing, and ski touring. Basically, it's like taking kind of all of the sports that have been niche and very like on the outskirts to a certain extent. Very nonconformist type people. The dirt bags and like kind of the weirdos. And I say that extremely lovingly. I am one of them. For the most part, all of those sports were trained just by people doing them more. They didn't actually train. It would be like saying, hey, I'm going to go run a marathon by running the fastest marathon I possibly can tomorrow. So it was always like with climbing, instead of, hey, here's a systematic way we can improve by strengthening our finger strength, like doing specific drills. Every time you go to the climbing gym, it's like, I'm going to try to climb my hardest grade, which would be like, I'm going to go try to run my fastest marathon tomorrow. I mean, like, obviously different physical impacts, but it was founded upon the principle of like, no, if we actually train for these endeavors, we'll be so much better at them rather than just trying to do them all the time. The training principles behind it are really just like that basic zone 1, zone 2, sub-aerobic threshold work, where you're just putting in a lot of time building your aerobic base, building the ability to move through the mountains efficiently, safely, to be able to eat, like keep yourself from getting to that red line where you're nauseous and you can't move. And a lot of that just stems from being way safer in the mountains.
Okay. If I came to you and I was like, hey, I would like to achieve metaphysical fitness, would you be my coach? Would you coach someone who's looking for metaphysical fitness, or would you be like, I don't know what that is? What?
I would actually, I would totally ask you to define what that means to you.
I feel like metaphysical fitness, I have this belief that here's how I've defined it, and this is based on nothing. I have no I barely made it through high school. But I think it's like physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional. I think it's like, so we like PSME, physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional. Like, I feel like you have to, like, for me, so much of like endurance is about being, fit is a funny word, but sort of being, equally fit, in these 4 zones or whatever they would be called, these 4 areas of self. And I think that a lot of athleticism is very physical, and I'm not like mad at that, but I'm just aware that like that's not enough for me.
Yeah, they have to be in line. Like, those all have to be in balance in order to achieve to the best of your ability. So yeah, I would be totally down. I think I would say that I'm not sure one person could address all of those aspects. Yeah. Where I would actually think that the most knowledgeable, successful athletes are actually those who have built a team around them. Like, I mean, you said you followed like pro cycling for a long time. It wasn't one person that was helping the best athletes. It's that you understand how to draw upon your team to help you with each of those different aspects. It's not just solely one person, because that person has shortcomings. They're obviously not going to be able, like, they're going to have weaknesses. But also people have, years of in-depth experience in each of those facets. And so why not use an expert in each of those fields rather than relying on someone who, yes, is maybe like incredible at one thing, but doesn't have as much experience in the others.
That's interesting to think about. Like, I mean, for a normal person, I would say the why not is like, that's like 4 $100 appointments a week.
Yeah, it's totally true. Yeah.
And then the other piece would be like, I wonder, and I don't know, this is just a thought. I wonder if the amalgamation of those 4 things becomes something of itself. Becomes something that isn't just the 4 parts, but is something kind of like even more than the 4 parts. But I don't know that that's true.
I mean, I think it becomes when all of
I mean, the taking off of that Blue Angel suggests that maybe we're onto something. Like, I felt like that so. Was.
Well, I think that when all of those come together is when you go into flow state. Like, that is, yeah. I know that that's something maybe we wanted to touch on. but it's when all of those pieces come together. And it's not that things are hard, not hard. That's the weird part about flow state, is it's like, it's not that it's not challenging, it's not that it's not difficult, it's just like you're equipped to handle it in the most calm and rational manner that you've ever been able to. And it's just like, no matter what, nothing shakes you from just this sense of completeness. Yeah.
100%, 100%. I think this is a great segue into the whole flow state thing. The reason you and I are connected is because I was curious about like managing like lizard brain. I think lizard brain is a concept that is like, we don't, nobody maybe, or I feel like every endurance ultra athlete has some relationship to lizard brain. Like kind of like they acknowledge it, they know about it, they've heard the expression. We all kind of know that the lizard brain is a thing that's like responsible for like basically keeping us alive, right? And so like managing our kind of like basic human needs. The idea of the lizard brain is like it's the oldest part of our brain. It's like the deep down base of our brain. And the reason it's called a lizard brain is because it's existed since like it's a dinosaur. It's very primal. And then the second piece of the brain, and this idea that there are three parts of the brain is like oversimplification, but basically, the lizard brain's the core, and then the mammal brain sits over that. And that is a bit more about like emotions and connections and rationale. And then there's like the brain, the thinking brain. They sort of work in concert, of course, but like they each one has its own sort of like kind of needs and desires.
Yeah.
So coach us, how do you have a lizard brain, so how do you deal with lizard brain?
It's so interesting because I've been thinking about this since we first started talking, and it's weird because I think we want to go back to that in endurance sports. You know what I mean? Like, so the people talking about it all the time of like, you're stripping away kind of yourself to get to this basic core uh, human element, which is just exactly like eat, sleep, breathe, the most basic elements of survival, which we kind of can't get to until we have taken away so much of societal comforts, I guess, in a way.
Yeah,
And so,
I think comfort and noise. I would say noise is
yeah,
another thing, right? Like it's like
yeah,
just like I got to do this, you got to be here, you got to go over there, you got to all that stuff.
yeah. So it's like we're kind of pushing ourselves into that brain, but we're also having to stop that brain from being too loud, because otherwise it would be like, well, you just need to stop and, eat, sleep, and recover, because like you're constantly, I mean, it's exactly the same thing of what your friend was
Listen,
saying.
listen to your body, ignore your body.
Yes, exactly. Listen to your brain, ignore your brain. And so this is how I actually talk to my clients. This is what my coach, he's a very spiritual person, which is interesting, but he told me pretty early on, he was like, when you're in an ultra, or, any kind of endurance event, you need to be able to separate yourself. So I think of it as like the transparent eyeball. I am all and I see all and am nothing. And so you're kind of like this floating being outside of yourself, looking at yourself with the ability to observe the emotional ups and downs of this situation of, like you get high highs and low lows, and you're able to absorb them, but not become attached to them. Because as soon as you become attached to them, you're riding this roller coaster that you're not in control of. And so, in a way, it's like the lizard brain is almost, well, I mean, I think it breaks down actually pretty well into the three that you were describing, where it's like you have to kind of allow the lizard brain to take over because you need to quiet the noise, but you also need to have the awareness still to be able to influence how you're reacting and turn off, that fright, flight, yeah, that and yeah, fight,
Fight, flight,
flight.
freeze. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah.
Those three instincts. So, And I think that like humans are really unique that we can actually do that with practice. It's hard. It requires this like mental strain. It is a mental strain to be able to observe yourself going through difficult moments and not allow the emotional aspect to catch up, which then leads to the physical reactions. But we're capable of doing it. So actually, what I always say is like, have, one of my favorite words when it comes to endurance actually is grace, where it's like, have grace for yourself for the way that your body is experiencing and your mind is experiencing the situations, but also stay firm with the fact that you are in control.
In doing the research initially around the lizard brain thing, the idea that like reframing. So it's like it's not a threat, it's a challenge. Challenge is something that you would rise to, and you would be inspired by. A threat, that's less cool. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to deal with threats, right?
And I think it totally depends, where I find it really interesting and why I enjoy coaching so much with uphill when you're getting into mountain sports is like when you're in a bike race, when you're in a trail run, it's more like, oh, am I just gonna have to like walk it in, or completely half-ass effort into the end of this race. You're not. It's not a lot for the most part. It's not a question of like, am I gonna live or not. When you start getting into high mountain sports, it's a question of like, am I going to fall off this cliff? Am I going to die of expo? The stakes are significantly different, and yet they're still kind of based in like the same area. It's tough. It's why I find mountain sports really challenging, because when you're in, cycling, trail running, it's like, oh, can I get faster? Can I get more competitive? Can I, you know, increase my place, et cetera, et cetera. But really, when you get into climbing, when you get into alpinism, mountaineering, ski touring, et cetera, it's how much more difficult of a route can I go? How much more risk can I incur? And risk, that's a whole other topic. Oh my gosh. But it's a matter of life or death. It's not just a matter of how fast can I or how hard can I push myself. And I think that that is a really interesting and difficult part of dealing with the lizard brain when you're in situations where it's like, yeah, if I put my foot wrong here, I'm falling off. Or like, I cannot freeze here because I will die. And so that is very hard. I have had a very, uh, exposure has been something that's really been a journey for me to deal with. It's not my favorite thing. I've gotten better at it, but um, it's your body's natural protection mechanism. Like, yeah, it's fucking dangerous. Don't go up there.
Wait,
But
so
also,
what do you
go
what
ahead.
when like what types of exposure have you had to like when does your like what like tell us about your lizard when have you
Oh
been like
yeah,
oh I don't like this.
yeah. So
I hate water personally.
okay,
Hate it.
yeah, water's yeah, yep,
And I've had to do some stuff where I'm like pack rafting, and so you take your bike apart and you put it on a pack raft, and like all your shit is on a pack raft, and it's funny because I'm like we're doing like class 1, class 2 rapids, and it's like not that hard. It just really isn't. But I'm like in my brain. I'm like in the Grand Canyon, like in a high water day, like so that water is mine. Where do you
yeah.
tell it? When have you had some issues?
Yeah, so I've done some mountaineering and rock climbing in the Alps. I've done ski touring in the Dolomites, where you're on, 45, or not 45, like 40 degree, traversing uh, Mount Whitney via the Mountaineers route. If you fall, it's really consequential, especially at the top. So like scrambling, and also I think probably where I struggle the most, honestly, is traversing on an angle with like a sheer drop off on the side. That to me is like very hard. Within a couple of trips I've done, we'll do like 4 to 5 days out in relatively high exposure areas, and I like can shut it off, can shut off. Like essentially for me, it is literally just blocking the thought, the feelings. It's like turning it off as much as I can in the moment of feeling that fear. Like I cannot address it. I can't like rationalize it. I just have to turn it off. And that will last me about 4 to 5 days, and then I fall apart. And I'm like crying, and I cannot turn that emotion off anymore because I have shattered myself.
You're like, okay, I'm gonna turn this off. If I think about this, I can't. I just can't. I'm not gonna think about it.
Yeah.
So you turn it off, and you think that that's like, oh, it's like a passive thing. It feels like you're having to like telepathically like levitate a fucking 18-wheeler. So like you don't see it. It's not happening. It's not present.
Oh,
It's
it's
not. But like in the back of your brain, somewhere, you're holding an 18-wheeler off the ground, and that's hard to do that
that is
telepathically.
that is such a good way of putting it. Yeah. It feels like you're up. It's like don't touch the big red shiny button like the whole time, where it's like if you hit that, if you touch it, everything's gonna fall apart. And like you're just constantly aware that button exists. You're like, but don't press it.
Yeah.
If
I
you
have
press
that.
it,
I know
you're
that.
done.
Yeah, I know that too. That like if you hit this, like it unravels so fast, and
Oh yeah.
it's a real nightmare. Most athletes I know would reflexively say, like, if I was like, what do you know about the lizard brain? They're like, you gotta like turn it off, you gotta quiet it, you gotta like manage it or whatever. Like you have to be motivated to continue moving forward. You have to want to stay alive, but you also can't let it become overwhelming. You're just like soothing the lizard.
When we're dealing with so many of these principles of endurance sports, like you're constantly riding just this very fine edge, and you're trying to perfect how to stay on the most narrow ridge line possible. Like it's so hard to get it completely right, and it's like how much do you listen, how much do you not listen? I think maybe it's befriending it in a way.
I was gonna say that like this is why I think metaphysical fitness is so important to the human experience. Cause slaying and conquering and all that is like dominating. It's like winning. It's not about slaying the dragon. It's about coexisting with the dragon.
I think it's nourishing the lizard brain in a way where it's like, okay, the most basic human needs and instincts, like we can fulfill that
I like that.
in kind
I'm
of.
gonna think about the. I like the idea of nourishing. I mean, I like this idea that like the lizard brain isn't like it's not about it's coexisting. It's not about like dominating it, or it's just like finding a
Yeah,
relationship with it.
yeah, because it's not
What is
evil. It's the basis of who we are.
Thank you so much for talking. We did talk about lizard brain, but we talked about so much more, and it's all lizard brain anyway.
Yeah, it's all the brains, all three.
It's all the brains, all three brains. Thank you so much, and this has been great. And thank you.
Yeah.